Hi again. Last time we finished off by looking at Le Meral Noir by Messiaen. It's an important piece for flute, and it's one that's gone on to inspire composers writing for the instrument right up to the present day. One of those composers is Sir Peter Maxwell Davies. Max, as he was known, was a prolific composer. He was master of the Queen's music, and he's one of the most important British composers of the last century. Some of his earlier music is pretty outrageous, but it adopted a slightly more Scottish tone after he moved to Orkney. He was influenced by the landscape there. He even wrote some music as a kind of political protest when there was an environmental threat to the island. And he founded the St Magnus Festival there, which still runs to this day. He was also influenced by a poet there, George Mackay Brown, and it's the title of this next piece we're going to look at today, The Kestrel Paste Around the Sun, which comes from one of his poems. Peat Cutting is the poem that's inspired this piece. And we laid off our coats, and our blades sank deep into water, and the lord of the bog, the kestrel, paced round the sun. When I was reading this poem, it reminded me a little bit of one of our most famous poets, Seamus Heaney. And I was looking into it, I found out that George Mackay Brown actually came to Ireland in 1970 and met Seamus Heaney then. It's very evocative, and so is the piece of music. Max wrote the piece in 3 short movements. Each has a very short 3-note recitative at the beginning to set the scene. And there's lots of techniques he's used to describe the landscape. There's very fast tremolo between certain pitches, and that sounds almost like the flapping of wings. There's air sounds used as opposed to definite pitch, and that sounds a little bit like the wind. And then we see other techniques we've seen before, fast grace notes and really fast flurries of notes that help describe the movements of the bird. It's a beautiful piece of music, and one I was very lucky enough to perform for the composer just a few years before he died. Another British composer I'd like to mention is Richard Rodney Bennett. Bennett was from England, although he moved to New York City and lived there until his death in 2012. He had eclectic tastes as a musician, and he wrote in a wide variety of styles, from modern concert music to avant-garde and jazz. He also started writing film and TV music pretty early on in his career, and he had a BAFTA award and several Oscar nominations. He wrote a beautiful piece in 1981 for solo flute called 6 Tunes for the Instruction of Singing Birds. The starling features twice in this piece, and we also hear from the woodlark, the canary, the bullfinch, and the East India nightingale. The score has a lovely quote from the Bird Fancier's Delight, written in 1717. Choice observations and directions concerning ye teaching of all sorts of singing birds, after ye flageolet and flute, if rightly made as to size and tone, with lessons properly composed within ye compass and faculty of each bird. And so that brings us to the last piece that I'll feature in this series. An Lon Dubh, or The Blackbird in Irish, was written by the Belfast composer Philip Hammond in 2013. The piece was written as a companion for Messiaen's Le Meral Noir, although it comes from a slightly different starting point. As Hammond says, "There's no real birdsong here, but rather a fanciful play with what I thought a blackbird might sing if it was so inclined. The true musical origin of the piece, however, is Edward Bunting's arrangement of an ancient Irish air, which he published in 1809, and which I include note for note at the end of the piece, as if it was also the outcome of the bird's inspiration." One other influencing factor was a poem by Dr. William Drennan, United Irishman and friend of Bunting, whose sister Martha McTeer lived in a house called Cabin Hill. Drennan wrote his poem in the grounds of that house, on the outskirts of Belfast, and my own personal connection with this place was in my mind as I composed the piece. I court the silence of retreat, concealed in thickest wood, more strongly, love and sing more sweet, from sense of solitude. This slow air that Philip Hammond features in his piece was first printed in 1718, although it could even be an older tune than that. It was very popular in Ireland in the 18th and 19th centuries. I find it interesting how a piece written in Northern Ireland in the last decade links us not only to one of the most important 20th century pieces for flute by Messiaen, but also to a time that predates the Vivaldi and Couperin pieces we looked at in the first video. I like how music and its connection to nature can transcend time and musical periods and styles. I think we've seen a lot of techniques that the composers have used in common in these pieces. Some of them have taken quite an impressionistic view for their pieces and used birdsong as a point of inspiration, and others have taken it a bit further and actually really tried to recreate what the bird sounds like in their pieces. But for all of them, one thing is definitely in common: nature is inspirational. If you're thinking about writing music, It could be worth looking around for different sources of inspiration. You might want to think about what other composers have done and see what you think works for them or doesn't work, what you like or don't like. I think we can see from all of the pieces we've looked at in these videos, there are so many differences and varieties of styles between the pieces that even though they draw on the same one source of inspiration, they have their own unique voice. If you play an instrument, maybe look at your own particular instrument and what defines it. What characteristics does it have, and how have people written for that? It might not be something that you wish to recreate. It might not be something that you particularly like, but it can be interesting in forming an idea about your own instrument's history and repertoire, and maybe defining what you would like to do with it or what pieces you would like to play. It's been really interesting for me looking at all the different pieces, and although I've mostly just played short clips and things, I hope it's given you an idea to explore a little bit more and think about other types of music. I've really enjoyed it anyway, and thank you very much for coming on this little journey with me.